All right, we're going to talk about 2020 startup dynasty draft strategies. And for this, we're going to talk about superflex drafts, obviously, because like literally anything we say in this video could be applied to a one quarterback league. Just all you have to know is that in one quarterback leagues, quarterbacks aren't valued. Don't draft them. It's kind of that simple. But in superflex leagues, it gets a lot more complicated. So we're going to go in there. We're going to talk about, I'd say, what do you want? Say 3 or 4 flex spots, start 2 running backs, 2 to 3 wide receivers, just something kind of standard. We can also do a tight end premium. We're not going to dive super deep into it. We're just going to talk about overall some trades you want to make, some areas you want to get into the draft. And while you're in these areas of the draft, what kind of positions and what kind of player profiles you're going to be targeting. And I'll start us off, Scott. I just kind of think that at this point, with how we're looking at the quarterback position being laid out, I think that if you have like a back end of the first round startup pick, if you could just start with a Russell Wilson and bring it back with a Kyler Murray, I think that would be extremely valuable in that range. And I know this is something that I didn't necessarily do in 2019, but I think that just because there's a sharp drop off after those top 6 quarterbacks, like you've talked about in a lot of videos. If I can get 2 of those with my first 2 picks, I think I'm doing that. Where are you looking with your early picks, or are you trying to trade? What are you trying to build around?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I've said it on a couple different shows, and I completely agree with you that if you're doing a startup now, and especially if you're getting one of the top, I think it's very clear that there's a top 4 tier if you're doing a super flex startup. And
Okay.
It really just depends on where you want to go. Obviously it's Mahomes and Lamar Jackson are the top 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And then it's still Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley as the first 2 skill players. After that, we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of the wide receivers, but as good as Michael Thomas performed last year, I'm not chasing that performance from someone like Michael Thomas. I'm not chasing that type of performance in terms of a startup. I would much rather go after the other positions, especially where we talked about the quarterback tiers being cut off the top 6. So clearly you're looking to trade back, but let's say, what are you doing if you're stuck in like the middle of the first round in a startup draft?
That would just be the worst. That would be the worst.
Yeah, well, I think that's where people may find, because it's easy if you get one of the top 2 picks. You get your choice of Jackson or Mahomes or Barkley or McCaffrey. If you're in the top 4, even if you don't want to take a running back, I think that you have to take McCaffrey and Barkley just based on the value that you're getting, the asset that you're getting. You can easily turn around and try to trade them for a package in a couple months. And still they're going to hold their value as one of the most elite assets in Superflex. So I think you have to take them. But I think the real question is, what do you do if you are stuck in the 107 slot, and the pick might be based on ADP or based on rankings? It might be Michael Thomas, or it might be Dalvin Cook, or it might be Ezekiel Elliott. I'm not breaking down doors to select any of those guys in a startup.
Yeah.
Not at their current price. And so I'm kind of with you. I may take the plunge, and if I can't trade back, I may be willing to invest in one of the quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm taking Deshaun Watson if I can't trade back.
Yeah, it'd probably be a reach to take Deshaun Watson or Kyler Murray that early. But if you're gonna commit to building around quarterbacks, if you can get 2 of those top guys. And I looked out last year, like in the Fleet League, I ended up getting Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson. That's what won me the league. I mean, that's just simply, and I had no clue that the tiers were going to break out that way. I had no clue that that's, where they were going to shake out a year from when we drafted. But I think if you can build a team around those guys and come out of the draft with 2 of those top 6, it really alleviates some of those questions that you have. And I think also it insulates the assets that you have too, because you may get a couple good quarterbacks. You may end up getting like Jimmy Garoppolo or Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins. Like, I don't think those guys are losing value anytime soon. But, we've talked on prior videos. It's just a flat tier. Very rarely is anyone going to come to you and say, I'm willing to make a mega offer on Jimmy Garoppolo, or I'm going to make a mega offer to you on, Kirk Cousins. It's just not going to happen. And so you want to get those top 6, because I think there's always going to be chances where someone's willing to, pay up to get one of those elite quarterbacks. So that's what I'm doing if I'm in the middle of the first round, middle to late first round.
I also just want to say real quick, I think the worst thing you could do at that, like, one is, like, if you're stuck there, is take one of these running backs that are either on their second contract or about to be, like a Dalvin Cook or Ezekiel Elliott. I think those are two of the worst picks you could possibly make, especially Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that Dalvin Cook is a sell. Not because I don't like him. It's just I think he's capped out at his value, and there's still some risk. And there's obviously a risk with Ezekiel Elliott too. So I'm totally with you. I would probably, if I really was pushed to pick between those guys, man, that I honestly don't even know who I would take. I would literally, and people may get on your case for doing this. I would almost be willing to trade back for just like draft slots at that point.
Yeah.
Because it's such a flat tier. You know, if I'm targeting Kyler Murray or I'm targeting Deshaun Watson or I'm targeting Dak Prescott, like, I know I'm probably going to be able to get them at the end of the first round. So, I'm willing to take almost whatever anybody's willing to give me. You know, I'll take a 2021 second round pick or something like that to move back and just get extra assets. Because honestly, I don't see the value being any different with those guys. So.
Awesome. Well, so say you do lock up, just say hypothetical, you lock up either one or two quarterbacks with those first two picks, and you're coming back at rounds 3 and 4. Historically, this is a spot where I kind of slam wide receiver. I don't like running backs in this range, but I mean, the past year we saw league-winning running backs come from these rounds, you know? So was I wrong in thinking that I should just be going after the wide receivers here every time, or should we be changing our strategy in 2020?
Well, okay, so here's my answer. Like most things, it depends, but are we talking about we're doing a start 2 running backs, right?
Yeah, start 2 running back and just say it's just a large starting lineup. Start 11 or 12 guys, but you have to start 2.
It's just PPR. It's not PPC, right?
It's just PPR. Just say it's like our Fleet 2 league, the second Patreon league.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is the range, like you said, that there is some running backs that you could potentially, look to take. But I think you really have to just determine what is your strategy here, because I think people get in startups. I found that people get way too obsessed with filling up their starting lineup versus I'm going to just bank on taking the best value. Now, if you're just saying you're going to fill up your starting lineup, I think the best strategy would be to try to lock down 2 running backs that are either 1 or 2 running backs that are in that secure, like top 10 to top 12.
So like Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders?
Yeah, so Jacobs or Sanders or Mixon or Nick Chubb. I think those guys need to be, if they somehow fall to like the early 3rd round, I think they have to be smash picks.
Yeah.
But I think you could also consider, if rookie picks are in the startup, I think you could consider either 101, 102, 103. Okay, let's say maybe it's 104, 105, depending on the, someone takes Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
But, if you're targeting running back and the 101 isn't gone, take the 101. Don't let the 101 get outside of the top 24 picks.
Yeah.
Because not only does that give you a shot to get, we talked about it on a couple videos, a couple weeks ago. Whoever the 101 is, whether it's DeAndre Swift or Jonathan Taylor, they're going to be a top 12 running back in Dynasty. They're going to be ranked that way from day one.
Did you see Ryan McDowell's tweet a couple days ago where he included the rookie running backs in his top 12?
Yep. Yeah. And that's something I've been saying for a while, that whoever the guys are, especially if any of them get first round draft capital, people are not going to let, last year I think Josh Jacobs was like running back 19 in ADP when he first started.
Okay.
And that's not going to happen this year. That these guys have had so much hype that whoever the 101 is, if it's DeAndre Swift and he goes in the first round, he's going to be ranked right there with Miles Sanders or Josh Jacobs, maybe even higher immediately. So you feel safe taking that 101, knowing I could get Joe Burrow, even if there's only. So here's the thing, Mason. If there's only 6 quarterbacks off the board and the 101 is on the board, and we've been saying the 101 is Joe Burrow, right?
Yeah.
You still take the 101 and you reach on it a little bit higher, just based on the fact that I have now the choice. I can really hold somebody's feet to the fire that needs a quarterback with that 101, or I have the choice to take the smash RB1 if I want in the class.
Yeah.
So you got to prioritize those let's just say top 4 rookie picks right now, because we don't know about Tua and we don't know about the RB4 and the RB5. But I'm pretty confident in saying in the startup, top 4 rounds, the 101 through the 104 absolutely have to be off the board before I'm considering taking, a running back that's outside like that top 10 or a receiver that's not a locked in stud. And at that point, I think the tier of receiver that you're going to be getting there's going to be a ton of them in the same tier. So I personally would probably look to take the 2 running backs if I think I can get 2 in the top 12.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I find myself going after those wide receivers just with the name appeal. Like this year, I have been seeing a couple mock startups. I know if I was in that 3rd round, I'd be taking Amari Cooper every single time, or even I know maybe I wouldn't even let him get past the 2nd round just because of my love for him. But Juju Smith-Schuster, if I could come out with like Juju and Amari in the 3rd and 4th round, even if it wasn't the smart move, I know I'm doing it. I just know myself.
Well, okay, let's for instance say that you get to the early 3rd round and you take Miles Sanders, right?
Yeah.
You can also take the approach, and this is what I did in the Fleet League last year, the Fleet 2 League. I just went 0 RB completely.
Yeah.
And I kind of regret it. I think it cost me. I was chasing running back production too much during the year. I mean, I did hit on like Devin Singletary, but I guess my alternate approach would be you can commit to going completely anti-zero or go anti-take running back early in this kind of startup draft and just hammer receivers. And what you would do is you would then want to load up on rookie picks later on. And that gives you trade assets to where, let's say, what receivers would you be looking at in the 3rd round? I mean, that's probably where you'd be targeting like A.J. Brown or potentially like, I don't know, Kenny Golladay or even Amari Cooper. That type of range would where you'd be able to get one of those receivers. Probably not A.J. Brown now, given his hype. But let's say you go receiver in round 3. I still think you want to try to get maybe one of those rookie picks in the top 8 to have a shot at a running back to draft. But let's say you started quarterback. That's how we started this mock, right? 2 quarterbacks. Yeah. What if you went 5 or 6 straight receivers and then you started loading up on whatever rookie picks were next in line? So you grabbed a bunch of like early 2nd rounders. That now puts you in a position where come draft day, remember what we talked about in the tier video. You're probably looking at receivers in the early 2nd round, in the mid 2nd round. You're also looking at quarterbacks. Now you also have 2 quarterbacks and 5 or 6 receivers on your team already from the draft. So now you're in a position where anybody that needs receiver or anybody that needs quarterback, you could potentially go back and try to trade one of the early receivers that you took for a running back that maybe went before those receivers that you took in the startup. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So it's kind of like you take the value because it's receiver on the board with plans that I'm going to come out of this draft with 3 quarterbacks, 7 or 8 receivers, and a bunch of 2nd round picks. And that really puts me at a strength with quarterbacks and receivers because I know that draft capital is probably going to end up being those 2 positions.
See, what I'm seeing now in these, like just say a couple of videos ago, we talked about the running back value right now and how nobody wants to trade for these running backs and all their value is completely tanked. And whenever I'm looking at these startup mocks, I see that to a certain degree, but not as much as in real leagues. You know what I mean? People are still willing to take these running backs high just because they feel like, I can get the running back 5 in round 2. You know what I mean? So they just feel obligated to take them there. So if I was doing a startup right now, I could see myself walking away with, like you're saying, no running backs just because I know that they're not going to have any trade value. And I'd rather just hold on to the stable assets for now, which are the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the rookie picks. And then exactly like you're saying, wait until you know what the running back situations are going to look like around the league. And then you can identify which positions that you want to go out and buy. If you want to go out and buy a Kenyon Drake, if he looks like he's locked in Arizona, or if you want to go buy a Melvin Gordon wherever he lands up. But for now, I mean, if you're doing a startup before the NFL draft, I think all these running backs should tremendously lower their value just because of the uncertainty of the position, and you can buy them. Maybe it costs you a little bit more later, but you're going to be paying just a small tax on the stability that you're going to be getting by taking the wide receiver and the startup.
Well, and I think that's a great point because we just did a video a couple weeks ago where we talked about the running back tiers, and one of the names was Leonard Fournette. I mean, do you consider him to be, because he's really not any different than like Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. They're all going into their 4th year. They all have a little bit of argument that you could make against them. But do you consider someone like Leonard Fournette or Aaron Jones, do you consider them to be in the quote unquote safe running back tier?
Okay, I know we talked about both these running backs, and I'm probably wrong, but I consider Fournette to be safe just because how I am with draft capital. But I don't consider Aaron Jones despite what he did, and then all those running backs in that tier.
Okay, so essentially you have Barkley, McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders, Leonard Fournette. That's 11 running backs.
Yeah.
So if that's where you drew your line, and those 11 guys were off the board, you're now into round 3, round 4, round 5. You're keeping an eye on where the rookie picks are. If the top 4 picks have gone off the board, well, that's probably Taylor, Dobbins, Swift.
And
that basically ends the tier of running backs that we can confidently say, at least in my eyes or in your eyes, and we're talking about just us. If your board is slightly different, then fine, extend it out a player or cut off a player.
Yeah.
But ultimately, once that tier's gone, you consider any pick you make at a running back to be risky. And so you may look back at this startup. I've done this before where I look back at startups last year. Let's say you do gamble on Todd Gurley in the 6th round, and you gamble on Melvin Gordon in the 5th, and you gamble on Aaron Jones in the 4th. You could look back in a year and be, wow, all those guys were top 12 running backs. That team just absolutely smashed because probably you still got decent receivers in, round 7, round 8, round 9. That team looks great. But what if you missed on 2 of those 3 running backs? Now you're kicking yourself going, wow, I took Todd Gurley over, what receiver in that same range that I potentially could have gotten a lot more value. I took Todd Gurley over DJ Chark. And a year from now, you're going, why the hell did I do that? And so just understand that when draw your line, what I do is I draw my line at running backs. Outside of that line, even if I miss, I have to understand that the player that I'm drafting outside of that line is risky. So make your decision. Do I want to build outside of that tier? If so, completely punt it. Draft all the receivers that are holding their value or potentially are going up and load up on 5 or 6 of them. Because if you take DK Metcalf instead of one of those running backs, there's probably going to be a good chance that someone's willing to trade you a running back for DK Metcalf at some point in the offseason. And you'll have way more information to evaluate it under.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about just real quick before we end it. What are you doing with your say your last 10 picks in the startup where you're just going after like taxi squad guys or maybe veterans that don't have much long-term upside? But what do you tend to do with those last picks?
So for me, I'm usually one that will, especially in superflex leagues, I will take some selective quarterbacks that I think still could potentially have some value. And then probably it depends on how I'm building these early rounds. If I went like I did in the Fleet 2 league last year, I went 0 RB and I loaded up on, 7 or 8 receivers in my top 11 picks. Mm-hmm. So in that case, I'm probably backfilling my roster with a lot of the running backs that nobody really wants. A lot of the running backs that I know are going to be on rosters, but probably need, an injury or two to actually be relevant. But I think it's important in that type of build, you want to go with the volume over the quality at running backs at that point. Like you want to make sure you get 8 or 10 of them on your roster versus only taking 4 or 5. So I think depends on how you build. If you built early with running backs, let's say you took the 102, the 104, and a couple other running backs in the top 8 rounds. Say your tier was extended out and you ended up getting Kerryon Johnson or James Conner or whoever it might be. If you're decent at running back going in, I think that you could pivot off to and look for some receivers that kind of went under the radar that either had maybe some draft capital or guys that people are completely off. Like I still can't give up on like Dante Pettis. That's a guy that literally's fallen to the end of startups. I would take a shot on a player like that. So it really just depends on how I build. I mean, how about you?
I mean, hey, that's exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be taking Dante Pettis in every single startup. I'm just looking at those year 2 or year 3 guys that have day 2 or better draft capital, and I'm buying them everywhere. Even though I just recently heard a late round quarterback podcast saying that's not what you should be doing. I just can't get off those guys that had the draft capital and have no value at this point, even though they've only been in the NFL for a year or 2.
Yeah, and you make a good point that there's even some guys that have been in the league for a little while that literally have no value. And so if you're sharp on what guys are going to be free agents, this is going to be really, really out there. But a guy that literally we just got in like the 39th round of a startup was Nelson Aguilar. I mean,
Okay.
he was outside the top 100 receivers. And, some of the names that are getting taken in front of him were guys that have never even done anything at the NFL level.
Yeah.
They're just players that somebody likes because they're, a year 2 or a year 3 guy. I'm not saying Nelson Aguilar is not good, but he's going to be a free agent. He does have high draft capital. He's actually done decent before. I'm not saying he's going to be a great player, but
He's
look
going to
what
be on an
happened with
NFL roster.
yeah, and he's going to be a free agent too.
Yeah.
So he gets a shot to where, like, I prefer a player like that. Whereas if Nelson Aguilar was stuck in Philadelphia again, and then they bring in a round 1 receiver, and then they sign like Robbie Anderson, I don't want Nelson Aguilar because he's a 5th receiver in a place where they know who he is. They've clearly brought in guys to go ahead of him. Whereas, you may get a decent shot on him where somebody signs him and he's the number 3 receiver in a decent spot. So I'm not counting on a lot. But it's just a small win. If he becomes a usable receiver there, I'd much rather take him over somebody that is absolutely a complete unknown. Like, he went behind like Equanimous St. Brown by like 5 rounds. And I think Equanimous St. Brown still has an intriguing profile, but he's never done anything. And they've never shown.
Also, he's like a round 6 NFL pick. That's right. Just insane.
Right. But I think the unknown, people fall for the unknown and over the known that's not very sexy.